She took $5,000 for a business that never existed. And the moment Judge Judy asked one simple question, her entire story collapsed. No cars, no profits, no business. Just one shocking admission that exposed everything. Before we get into this unbelievable courtroom showdown, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, at what point would you realize someone was never planning to pay you back? Now, let's get into the case. Most Judge Judy cases start with a disagreement. Some start with a misunderstanding. And some start with bad decisions. This case started with trust. The kind of trust that can cost you thousands of dollars. When Mr. Crosby first met Ms. Bierman, he had no idea their friendship would eventually end in a courtroom. To him, she seemed genuine, hardworking, friendly, someone who was simply trying to improve her life. And that's exactly why what happened next became so expensive. The two met while Ms. Bierman was working as a bartender. Like many friendships, it started with casual conversations, small talk, life stories, personal struggles. Over time, those conversations became more frequent. And eventually, a level of trust developed between them. Now, here's something important. Judge Judy immediately picked up on it later. This wasn't just a random financial transaction between strangers. There was an emotional element underneath everything. And whenever emotions get involved with money, problems usually follow. But Mr. Crosby didn't know that yet. At the time, he thought he was helping someone he trusted. And that's exactly where the story begins. One day, Ms. Bierman approached him with what sounded like a great opportunity. According to her, she had done her homework. She had researched a business idea. She knew how to buy vehicles at low prices and resell them for profit. The plan sounded simple. Buy, flip, profit, repeat. And according to her, the profits would come quickly, very quickly. In fact, she claimed she could repay him within only a couple of months. Think about that. A business opportunity, fast profits. Quick repayment, no complicated contracts, no investors, no banks, just trust. Looking back, that should have been a warning sign. But hindsight is always perfect. At the time, Mr. Crosby saw something different. He saw potential. He saw opportunity. And most importantly, he saw someone he believed was telling the truth. So he agreed. And that's when $5,000 entered the picture. But there was one detail that made this situation even more serious. Something Judge Judy would later focus on. The money wasn't just sitting around in a spare account. According to Mr. Crosby, he actually borrowed against his truck to obtain the funds. Let that sink in. He went into debt for someone else's business idea. That means he wasn't simply risking money. He was risking his own financial stability. And that makes what happened next even worse. At first, everything appeared normal. The money changed hands. The business plan was supposedly moving forward. And Mr. Crosby waited. A few weeks passed. Nothing unusual. Another few weeks passed. Still no repayment. Still no profits. Still no updates. But he wasn't worried yet. After all, businesses take time, right? At least that's what he thought. And that's exactly why what happened next became so important. Every time he asked about the money, he received another promise, another assurance, another reason to wait. Soon, very soon. Just be patient. Everything is under control. Sound familiar? Judge Judy has heard those words thousands of times. And usually they all mean the same thing. The person doesn't have the money. But at this point, Mr. Crosby was still willing to believe her. Months continued passing. The money never returned. Yet strangely, the friendship continued. And this is where things become psychologically interesting, because most people assume victims suddenly realize they're being deceived. That isn't how it usually happens. Most victims convince themselves everything is fine, because accepting reality is painful, admitting you made a mistake is painful, admitting someone used your trust is painful. So instead, many people keep believing. And that's exactly what seemed to happen here. Mr. Crosby continued waiting, continued trusting, continued hoping, but then something changed. Something that finally forced him to confront reality. The communication started disappearing. Messages became less frequent. Responses became slower. Excuses became weaker. And before long, communication nearly stopped altogether. Now the situation looked very different, because someone who plans to repay a debt usually communicates. Someone who plans to honor an agreement usually communicates. Someone who disappears completely raises questions, a lot of questions. And those questions eventually led to court. But here's where the story gets really interesting. Because when the case finally arrived before Judge Judy, the defendant wasn't denying she received the money. Not at all. Instead, she was making a completely different argument. She claimed the money wasn't a loan. According to her, It was an investment, and investments carry risk. Businesses fail. People lose money. That's life. At first glance, that argument sounds reasonable. In fact, some viewers watching probably would have believed her. But Judge Judy wasn't interested in surface-level explanations. She wanted specifics. And specifics are where stories either survive or collapse. As the hearing continued, Judge Judy started asking questions. Civil questions, direct questions, the kind that sound harmless, but often expose everything. And almost immediately, the defendant began struggling. Every answer seemed incomplete. Every explanation felt weak, and Judge Judy noticed. The judge has spent decades listening to people explain away bad decisions. She knows when a story isn't adding up, and this story wasn't adding up, not even close. But the real collapse hadn't happened yet. That moment was still coming. Then Judge Judy focused on the business itself, the supposed business, the business that allegedly failed, the business responsible for this entire lawsuit. And she asked the question, a question so simple that nobody expected it to become the turning point of the case. When did you buy the first car? Silence, the defendant answered. And with that answer, everything changed. She never bought one, not one vehicle, not one car, nothing. The courtroom practically stopped, because suddenly the entire defense made no sense. How does a car flipping business fail without ever buying a car? How does an investment fail without an investment? How does a business collapse without ever existing? Judge Judy immediately saw the contradiction, and once she saw it, there was no going back. The defendant had just admitted the most damaging fact in the entire case. But unbelievably, things were about to get worse, much worse, because Judge Judy wasn't finished asking questions. Now she wanted to know something else. If there were no cars, where did the money go? The answer came quickly: bills, transportation, personal expenses, everyday life. And just like that, the entire case transformed. This wasn't a failed business venture. This wasn't a failed investment. This was money given for one purpose and used for another. Judge Judy immediately recognized the significance. The defendant promised one thing, then did something completely different. And that's where credibility begins falling apart. But the biggest twist still hadn't arrived, because the most damaging evidence wasn't coming from the plaintiff. It wasn't coming from bank records. It wasn't coming from witnesses. It was coming from the defendant herself. Judge Judy reviewed a written statement, a statement written by Ms. Bierman. And inside that statement was a detail that completely destroyed her argument. She admitted she had offered Mr. Crosby 25% of the profits. 25%. Think carefully about that. If somebody gives you a gift, why would you promise profits? If somebody donates money, why discuss future earnings? If there was no agreement, why mention percentages at all? The contradiction was impossible to ignore, and Judge Judy immediately noticed it. Now the defendant had a serious problem. Actually, several serious problems. Problem number 1, she received the money. Problem number 2, she never bought a single car. Problem number 3, she spent the money elsewhere. Problem number 4, she admitted discussing profit sharing. Every path led to the same destination, and the deeper Judge Judy looked, the worse things became. At this point, many people would have stopped arguing. Many people would have admitted defeat. Many people would have accepted responsibility. But not everyone responds that way under pressure. And that's exactly why this case remained fascinating. Because even after all the contradictions were exposed, the defendant still tried defending her position, and every attempt only made things worse. Judge Judy watched carefully, she listened carefully, and then she delivered the observation that effectively ended the case. Businesses fail after they begin. Investments fail after money is invested into the business itself. But neither of those things happened here. There was never a business. And once that fact became undeniable, the outcome became unavoidable, the courtroom could feel it. The plaintiff could feel it. Even the defendant appeared to feel it. The verdict was coming, and everyone knew exactly where this was headed. Judge Judy ruled in favor of Mr. Crosby. Full judgment, $5,000. Case closed. Just like that. One simple question had exposed everything. No complicated investigation, no hidden witness, no dramatic surprise evidence. Just one question. When did you buy the first car? And one answers, I didn't. That answer destroyed the entire defense. In the end, this case wasn't really about business. It wasn't about cars. It wasn't even about money. It was about trust. Trust that was earned, trust that was used, and trust that ultimately cost somebody $5,000. What makes this case memorable isn't the amount of money. It's how quickly the story unraveled once Judge Judy started asking the right questions, because sometimes the truth isn't hidden. Sometimes it's sitting right there, waiting for one simple question to expose it. So now we want to hear from you. At what point do you think Mr. Crosby should have realized something was wrong? The missed payments? The endless excuses? Or the moment communication stopped completely? Comment below and let us know. And if you enjoy courtroom drama, liar, exposed stories, scam cases, shocking Judge Judy moments, and justice served content, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and watch our next video. Because if you thought this courtroom disaster was unbelievable, the next one is even crazier.